So we're going to move on to BlockNative, Matt Cutler. So Matt, are you here? Let's see.
I am here.
He is. Matt, good to see you.
Hey, John, great to see you as well. Good to be back.
Yeah, good to be back. Good to have you back. So we're going to talk about some new Legos, it sounds.
Indeed. Rock and roll. Here we go. So happy ETHDenver 2021, everyone. I'm Matt Cutler. I'm founder and CEO from BlockNative. We've been building in the Ethereum space since 2018, but we actually launched the company back at ETHDenver 2019. And so ETHDenver holds a special place in our heart. And it's funny, all the stuff that we're doing right now, you could look at and see it back in 2019 if you squinted and imagined, but we're doing it at just a much greater scale with the best companies, the best projects out there. So it's super fun. I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking about Mempool Primitives. Mempool is sort of front and center right now with gas prices being what they are and everything, the hacks that happened this week. And just there's a lot going on out there, but Mempool data is exceptionally hard to work with. And so we're going to talk about how to work with it, why it matters, and what you can do. And I'm going to go hands-on and show a bunch of stuff for all the builders out there who want to build on top of Mempool data. So, we're going to talk about Mempool and primitives, but just to level set, let's talk about them each individually. So what's a primitive? They're basically just building blocks. And the whole secret here is Ethereum is basically built on this notion of composability. You can take the various Lego bricks, put them together, create a new flavor sensation, and they enable your developer and builder expressiveness, your creativity. Now, what we sort of really focus on is Mempool data, making it easy and accessible to work on. We're going to talk a bunch about that. So Lego bricks here. So the idea here is early dApps were like a Lego house. They were pretty crude. But as the ecosystem has evolved and more primitive types, i.e. more and more Lego bricks, enable much more sophisticated, much more polished, much more approachable experiences for every level of the ecosystem. So we believe that focusing on Mempool primitives basically allow all builders and all traders in the space to work with Mempool data equally and directly. So let's talk a little bit about Mempool and what's going on here. Now, while a lot of folks are aware of Mempool as a concept, I find myself in conversations where folks sort of need to think more deeply about it. So we talk about the Mempool as the pre-consensus layer. It's the place where transactions go before consensus can be reached, which has all sorts of very profound implications. So first off, the Mempool or the pre-consensus layer impacts everything, right? It impacts every transactions, every protocol, every dApp, every builder, every trader, every user. Everybody deals with it, but it is largely opaque and invisible, right? What's going on in the Mempool determines the transaction fee or gas price, the order of transactions, the timing of transactions when they get confirmed, any slippage that may be a part of it, and the terms of settlement. So overall, if we look at this, it really matters to the participants, to the protocols, to the transactions, to the financial results of them. And yet it remains a relatively obscure or not very common piece of infrastructure to work on. And our objective here is to fix all of that. So, but the problem is it's kind of messy, right? So this whole world is super opaque. Because it's pre-consensus, there's no truth. There's no, what is the canonical version of the Mempool? What's actually going on? You don't really know. Turns out that there's no such thing as one mempool, that every node in the network has its own unique copy of the mempool, and those nodes and their contents can vary wildly, particularly under periods like we're going through right now of high congestion. So you could have a node or even a set of nodes, and you could look in their mempools and not actually have good visibility into what's going on in the network or what's going on with transactions that you care about. Blockchains and Ethereum, of course, in particular, are these discrete systems. They click forward block by block. But the mempool is a sub-second streaming system. Literally, transactions stream in real time at every second. So the mechanics of the data are quite a bit different than traditional on-chain data. Hey, guess what? Because it's pre-consensus, it's mutable. So you can change transactions while they're in the mempool. That has all sorts of implications for how transactions behave and user experience. It's probabilistic, so there's nothing guaranteed in this world. It's all a matter of probabilities about what's going to happen. And with as many transactions are happening in enough time, all sorts of low probability events will happen in the mempool, which we've seen. And the data that's there is really quite sparse. So if you look at the actual contents of mempool, it doesn't tell you very much. And so you got to do a bunch of work as a builder to try to extract any useful meaning out of it and do anything with that. Now, it's also inhabited. And this has, again, come to the fore in recent months. But the mempool is not this benign place. Because it's mutable and it's programmable, it's a highly adversarial environment. So while you're doing your transactions, there are all sorts of automated systems that are operating in the mempool, looking at mempool data to try to figure out if they can extract value from your transactions, if they can extract value because they know something a little bit before everybody else does. And so this is, of course, this notion of Ethereum as a dark forest. This is sort of the paper, the blog post that coined it all by Dan Robinson and Georgios. I totally recommend reading this if you haven't. It's a fascinating read. And this meme of Ethereum as a dark forest with apex predators occupying it has now carried through, and there's many, many blog posts out there. Now, we at BlockNative exist to fix this. We exist to build global infrastructure to make the mempool understandable, kind of like what we're doing right now, to make it transparent so everybody knows what's going on it, to make it accessible so people have equal access to the data so it's not this weird asymmetry that's happening today, to normalize the data so there actually is a consensus view, or not quote unquote, but like a common view of what's actually happening in the mempool, what matters, to make it programmable and easy to work with. So you as a builder don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you want to do something, to make these programmable elements composable. So you can use Lego bricks, you can use these mempool Lego bricks with all the other stuff that you're doing to deliver next generation experience for users, to deliver more secure protocols, to deliver new and more innovative trading strategies, to basically take advantage of this massive, opaque, weird data set in the experiences that we deliver to the Ethereum users and that we leverage as participants in the ecosystem. So at the end of the day, we here at BlockNative are all about making the mempool, sort of a buildable component of the ecosystem, just like everything else on equal footing. And unfortunately, it's not there right now, but we're making pretty rapid progress, and we're pretty excited to sort of share that. So let's talk about building with mempool data, and let's sort of give some examples of some of these primitives that we're pioneering and how you as a builder can incorporate them into your hacks now at ETHDenver, but also into everything that you're going to be building moving forward as you participate in the ecosystem. So what I'm going to go through today are sort of 4 primitives, and the idea here is it's kind of crawl, walk, run, where we're going to start with some simple ones to start working with just to get a feel for it. And then we're going to build up to more sophisticated concepts. Now, to do so, I'm going to use tool sets that we offer at BlockNative. One of the things that we've really focused on is to make this stuff much more tangible. So you can look at mempool data, you can work with mempool data in a very visceral way and not such an abstract way. We have found, earlier in our life cycle, we had built our data platform, we had APIs, we would talk to people about it, and they'd sort of nod their head. But it wasn't until we showed folks how to go hands-on with the data before the light bulb started to pop. And so we're working very hard on these capabilities, and there's more coming out pretty soon. But that's what we'll be using just to sort of illustrate a lot of these concepts. Now, the 4 primitives I'm going to go through is hot wallet monitoring, which is a one-on-one thing. Any user out there can do this, monitor your own hot wallet. And then 2, we're going to generalize that into smart contract transaction streaming. We're going to monitor a Ethereum smart contract live on mainnet right here. It's going to be this little teeny tiny smart contract called Uniswap v2 router, which of course everyone knows and is the most popular and widely used smart contract in the ecosystem. Then we're going to show how to generalize that into providing user transaction feedback for anybody who's using a dApp. Believe it or not, user transaction feedback in our ecosystem is well behind what it should be. And many of the top, many dApp experiences, but many of the top DEXs in the world actually lie to their users about transactions because they're unable to handle replacement transactions cleanly. And because we're working in the mempool, we make short work of that. We'll show a little bit of that. And then finally, the most sophisticated one, rather a new take on how to do gas estimation, which is what we call block prediction. So trying to predict what's likely to go into the next block, and then based on the gas prices of those transactions going into the next block, to inform you as a builder, to inform you as a trader, how to then appropriately set the gas fees on your own transactions. And we'll talk through all of that. So, okay, with that, what I'm going to do is jump right in. So the first thing we're going to go through is hot wallet monitoring, right? So the basic idea here is use the mempool to detect inbound or outbound activity to your hot wallet. It's pretty interesting because, of course, we're going to do this when we're doing our own transactions, but this technique will monitor and tell you whenever tokens are airdropped to you. So right now, airdrops are happening quite commonly. People are asking, have I received it? You're sort of hunting around. These techniques, just by hot wallet monitoring in the mempool, will just give you a push alert and say, oh, hey, I just got some airdrop tokens. Awesome, right? And then also, it's kind of peace of mind. So when you're out there yield farming or doing swaps, right? You know exactly what's happening with every transaction, and you know you have peace of mind that someone's not doing something unauthorized, because if they are, you'll get notifications of so. And so the whole idea of this is this notion of reducing transaction anxiety. We all know that feeling of you submit a transaction and you get that uneasy feeling in your stomach about what's going to happen. Is it going to go through? Am I going to get a stuck wallet? And we thought at the beginning of all of this, transaction anxiety was something that was for noobs. Right. What we've learned is transaction anxiety is universal, but actually some of the most experienced traders I know, the most experienced builders who have the most value at play, have the greatest anxiety because they know all the ways that things can go wrong. And this one little technique, hot wallet monitoring, basically just lowers your blood pressure, lowers your anxiety anytime you're transacting. So let's get into this. Now, I'm just going to go to our homepage. It's sort of the easy place to start, blocknative.com. And there's this big button right here called Start for Free. And if you click that, you'll pop over to what we call Mempool Explorer. So Mempool Explorer is this visual front end for working with mempool data. And the basic idea is pretty simple. You create things you're subscribing to over here, and then you get real-time results off of the mempool over here. We're going to create a new subscription called Matt's Hot Wallet. Oops. Right, and then I got to give it an address. Now, it could be any smart contract address or wallet address, but I'm just going to go over here to my MetaMask, which is, by the way, on Rinkeby. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to hit create, and hocus pocus, just like that. We are now live monitoring. Oops, I got to switch this over to Rinkeby. The Rinkeby testnet for any transactions involving my hot wallet. Now, of course, there's no transactions, but we can go ahead and we can create one. So I'm going to pop over here to MetaMask, and I'm going to send myself 0.1 ETH. And now when I hit confirm, a whole series of interesting things are going to happen. So this is stock MetaMask. It's broadcasting transactions via Infura, and a whole sequence of events happens quite rapidly. So what happens is I'm going to sign my transaction. I'm going to broadcast it to Infura. It's going to hit an Infura gateway. Infura is going to inspect that transaction, make sure it's valid. If it's valid and there's room in that gateway's mempool, it will insert it into its mempool. It will then broadcast that transaction to its peers over the peer-to-peer protocol or gossip protocol, and that transaction will circulate through the Rinkeby testnet. Now, we at BlockNative operate this global infrastructure, including Rinkeby testnet nodes, and so we're listening right now for any transactions involving my hot wallet address. And so we're going to pick that up. We're going to see that there's a new transaction. We're going to match it to this subscription, and then we're going to broadcast an event so it shows up here. And all of that happens this quickly. So 3, 2, 1, confirm, and there's the pending transaction. Wow, and there's the confirmed transaction. Rinkeby is quite fast today. And so you saw 2 events come in. So the first event is the pending transaction, my intent to send, and then the confirmed transaction, the testnet has confirmed it. It's now on chain, of course, in the testnet. And each one of these fields is properties of that transaction. Now, the mempool itself only contains a few of these. The rest are expanded. So these are all standard things that you can derive from the contents of a mempool entry, but aren't there by default. You got to actually do work to stretch all this stuff out. And again, one of the things that sort of makes this easier is we do all that on your behalf, so it's easier and more addressable to work with. Now, these are JSON payloads, so they're easy to work with. And you can then, of course, basically upload these to to an API and make them composable. So what I actually do is I do that with an API key and then write it out to a webhook that goes to a Slack channel. And so anytime my hot wallet is involved in a transaction, I get messages in Slack pushed to my phone, on my desktop, everywhere I am. And I can tell you it's pretty nice to have that experience, just to know what's going on. And just the other day, I did a big swap. It was $123 in gas fees, and just seeing what was going on with that sort of put me at ease while that was happening. So anyways, that's a Mempool Primitive 1, how to monitor your own hot wallet. The other thing I would recommend is do what I did, like do some test transactions on Rinkeby to get a feel for this, and it will start to make sense. Okay, so that's Mempool Primitive 1 for reducing transaction anxiety. Now let's generalize it. So what we're going to do now is, instead of looking at a wallet address, we're going to look at a smart contract address. So what we're going to get is a real-time data stream of mainnet transactions. And this notion of smart contract transaction streaming is you can have multiple contracts. So you can be looking at multiple things at once, and then you can filter those down to only get specific events that you care about. And the whole idea here is, hey, you're seeing transactions at their earliest point of origination in the network, and because you know first, you can therefore act first on it. So I'm going to go back to my Mempool Explorer, and what I'm going to do is reset it. Okay, so that just brings it back, and we're going to go ahead and watch Uniswap v2 router. And what I'm going to do, I happen to have the Uniswap v2 router smart contract address right here, and add that. And now when I hit create, we're going to monitor mainnet for Uniswap transactions happening live. This is, live without a net. And what do you think is going to happen? We're going to get a fire hose. So these are actually all of the pending mempool events that are being broadcast and we're detecting right now against Uniswap v2. Now, you can see this sort of shooting by, right? It'll get to 50 and then it will stop. So this is what we would call a fire hose. It can be pretty hard to work with, because as a developer, as a builder, now I got to ingest this rapid data stream and I got to pick through for the things that I want. Now, something worth noting here, we actually decode the ABI on the fly. Using Mempool Explorer, you can actually upload custom ABIs. So again, that's something that helps work with this data. We'll talk about that in a second, but Uniswap is one of the ones that we support out of the box. Now, this fire hose can be overwhelming, and so what we want to do is we want to filter it down. And so what we allow is the ability to filter on pretty much any aspect of the payload. So for instance, let's only look at exception transactions on Uniswap v2. So I might go down and say, I want to look at the status of each transaction where it is not confirmed, right? Let me save that. We can see that right there. I'm going to add another filter to the subscription, and I'm going to have the status be not pending, because that's the typical transactions, pending and confirmed. And so now what we'll do is just press play over here. And now you'll see it's a lot less activity. We're filtering out all those pieces of it. Oh, here's a stuck transaction. And you'll see these events come in. Now, by the way, there's a lot of data here, so we can actually filter out the payloads. Let's just look at status. Going to add that, and I'm going to look at hash here as well. There's hash. Whoops. Add that, and now we can see drop transactions, canceled transactions, speed up transactions. I'm just going to stop the auto scroll here. Now, what's interesting is on major smart contracts like Uniswap v2, you have a lot of replacement transactions. So these are transactions that get broadcast, and then a second or more than a second transaction gets rebroadcast with the same nonce, but with a higher gas price, and they get characterized as things like speed up and cancels. And because we're monitoring these transactions in the mempool and keeping track of it, we actually can identify which transactions are associated with prior transactions and then label them as such. This is super powerful because as a builder, you generally are not aware of a replacement transaction because you're not party to it. The replacement transaction is a function of the user and their wallet, not involving the underlying Dapper protocol or in an automated system as well. And so being able to keep track of speedups and cancels and other forms of replacement transactions is a very powerful consequence of leveraging mempool primitives while you're building. Now, just in this regard, all of these hashes are actually hot links into our friends at Etherscan. So if you want to see the status of a particular transaction, we can click on that. It'll open it up. Sometimes that happens. It was probably replaced by something else. Let's see about this one. Oh, so there we go. Sometimes these transactions get sped up and replaced so quickly that they don't even show up in Etherscan, which is pretty interesting. But here's one where we just said it was a cancel, and it sort of shows the state of that. So you can see that going on there. Now, you can do all sorts of other really useful things when you're using this mempool primitive. So what I'm going to do is I'll clear both of this, right? And now what we can do, because we're decoding the ABI, what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter the subscription on actually specific contract calls. So I want to look at the contract call method name, matches, and then look, here's all of the contents of the Uniswap v2 router ABI. So if I only want to know when someone is swapping exact ETH for tokens, I can put that in there, and then I can isolate this out. Let's remove both of these. Let's start over here. And now here's a pending transaction for, and here's more coming in for swap ETH for exact token. You can add filters here for above a certain value or a certain criteria. And now you're beginning to, of this massive sea of transactions flowing through the mempool, able to pick out the ones that are most relevant to your project, most relevant to your users, and do useful things with it through composability. So that's a real quick example of the second mempool primitive, which is smart contract transaction streaming. Now, the third primitive I want to go into is to sort of generalize this, which is user transaction feedback. So now that you know what's going on with these transactions in the mempool, you can extend that capability directly out to end users, right? So you can inform your end users when there's pending transactions. You can inform your end users when their transactions are confirmed, but you can also inform your users if they get stuck, if they get dropped, if they get speed up or canceled. And the whole idea here is this is kind of a big headache to build on your own, and leveraging this sort of infrastructure, it's like short work. This is minutes to maybe a couple of hours to do. The whole idea of doing so, why would you do this? If you provide increased transparency behind transactions to your end users, they will do more transaction with you. They'll do them more frequently and more recently and at higher values. This is all about boosting confidence in the ecosystem and helping people feel comfortable, particularly as all these new users are coming on board to the Ethereum ecosystem. We as builders have an obligation to make that experience as smooth and easy as possible. Now, we offer a library called Notify. This is BlockNative Notify.js. This is our documentation. You can read through here. It's actually pretty straightforward. It's fully documented, obviously. But at the top of our documentation, we have this little React demo that's sort of just a test harness for what we do here. Here you can connect your wallet. I've already done so. But what I'm going to do just to show these transaction notifications is I'm going to send myself a transaction. You see these little pop-ups down here. So what we're doing is we're sharing with the end user information about what's going on. So if I reject this, I get feedback around that. Now I can try that again. Let's just send a transaction. You see my MetaMask fires. And when I hit confirm, your transaction has started. A timer is going by right now. By the way, my Slack is firing off because this is my own personal hot wallet. And then as soon as the Rinkeby testnet confirms that transaction, you'll see that right there. And so these little tools down here, which by the way, you can move around the screen pretty easily. It's pretty configurable, and you can change the look and feel of them. Basically just provide information back to the user about the state of their transactions. And so you can integrate this stuff directly in your front end, and users benefit, and you don't have to worry about it. So every transaction that gets initiated on your DApp, your systems can provide status update. This, of course, is also available via an API, so you can integrate and leverage this data in all sorts of interesting ways, and we encourage you to do so. What we hear consistently from our customers who deploy these sorts of capabilities is it increases positive behavior, it increases user satisfaction, and it results in just a lot fewer support requests to them as well. So that was transaction feedback. Now, the fourth one is gas estimation via block prediction. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes on this and then wrap up. But basically, the expectation of the mempool is kind of like a flash mob. Like, we're all going to bring our nodes together. You're going to put your transaction in. We're all going to coordinate together. And guess what? We're all going to have a good time. But in reality, it's more like a mosh pit, that it's a pretty violent place and it can surge in terms of its activity. So you ask your friend, hey, I need to go to the bar and get a drink. How's the mosh pit? You say, well, 2 minutes ago it was mellow. And then you go through there and a new band has showed up and you get your nose broken on your way to the bar, right? And this is very much the same thing that happens with the mempool. Is it's subject to surge behavior. Right now, by the way, with ETH at all-time highs, the level of activity is quite high. And so basically what we're offering here, what we're trying to do is look at what's the likely contents of the next block based on the top of the mempool. We're going to then inspect those transaction gas prices, and then we're going to set confidence intervals to say, hey, how confident are you that at a minimum gas price, you're going to get into the next block, right? So the whole idea here is tooling to enable developers and traders to target getting into the next block without grossly overpaying. So to do this is actually pretty easy. I'm just going to go back to Mempool Explorer and reset. And you see this little widget right here. Maybe if I stretch this out a little bit. Yeah, there it is. 367 GUI, right? Now, this is our gas platform Explorer. But what I'm going to do is hit this gear. And I'm going to select both show detail and show payload. And then we're going to actually see API. Oh, let's see here. Why is that not happening? We should be seeing events right here. Oh, I know why. I have to press play. So now we're connected. See the green dot there. Okay, there we go. So here are these gas platform payloads. By default, this updates every 5 seconds. And I'm going to stop the auto scroll. It's going to keep filling in. And what we see here is the current block number is 441. The next block number is 442. Our ecosystem, the nodes, are basically telling us there are 264 transactions projected to be in the next block. And at the 99% confidence interval, so 99% sure to get into the next block, the minimum gas price is 339. So if you're a builder or a trader and you got to make sure you're transacting to be in the next block, you need to be at 339 or above to have a 99% confidence interval of this. And if we look at it, in other versions of this, it'll tell us the count of those transactions, right? So here's the 95th confidence interval, the 90th confidence interval, the 80th, the 70th, and the 50th. So if you want a 50-50 chance of being in the next block, minimum gas price at the moment of this payload was 282. So you can see the gas prices are constantly changing as new blocks get created, as new transactions come in, and these the prices associated with the confidence intervals change dynamically. And so again, this is an API, so you can incorporate this capability into your project, and therefore help users have predictable transaction performance without overpaying. And this is all powered by real-time mempool data, not backtest models or anything like that. And so there's a whole bunch of really interesting things you can do when you're using real-time mempool data for this purpose. So with that, I just want to wrap us up. If we think about on-chain data or blockchain data as the truth, the mempool contains all possible future truth. It is the future. And by looking at mempool data, you literally can see seconds or sometimes minutes into the future. And this is super powerful. So here's a quick meme we put together, obviously from Marvel, right? I looked forward in time and saw 14 million possible futures. And how many of them did I win the trade? 1, right? So knowing the conditions you need to win the trade or to avoid a hack or to secure your wallet or to protect your protocol, that's all data in the mempool. And we're trying to make this stuff as easy to use as possible. Look, it's a dark forest out there. It's an adversarial environment. And let's bring light to this and let's really illuminate this stuff so that everybody in the ecosystem is working with the same data, everybody has access to the same tooling, and that users, builders, traders alike can take advantage of these capabilities. So we very much encourage you to join a lot of the top projects in the ecosystem that are using our libraries. And if you're ready to start building, you can start for free at BlockNative. Look at it yourself. There's a ton of content. There's a ton of writing out there. And we just really want to encourage everybody in the ecosystem to pay attention to mempool data and to incorporate it in thoughtful and meaningful ways. And that's all for me. I'm Matt Cutler from BlockNative. It's great to be back at ETHDenver, and I'll pass it back to John.